I just want to begin by saying that I'm happy and thrilled to be with you. This is, I think, my 5th time in this retreat center. It's always a blessing to be here with you all. And I'm also happy that my family gets to join me. They travel quite a bit, and I don't take them with me where I go. But of course, Orlando is a beautiful place to be. So happy to be with you. And I just want to give you a quick intro as to what we will cover today, God willing. And I'm happy to be with my fathers as well, and of course in the presence of His grace. 2 questions we will have this weekend. Well, before I go to the questions, just a quick intro of myself. My name is George Bassilios, and I'm involved I live in San Francisco. I've been there for almost 30 years, and I'm involved in what is called the apologetics ministry. Apologetics is defending the Christian faith. I do on-campus ministries, go to universities and colleges in U.S. and Canada to discuss the relevance of Jesus Christ, the existence of God, truth, and so on and so forth. And today I have 2 questions with 2 answers. First question, as you can see on the screen, why am I not an atheist? Or we can say, why am I a believer in God? And the second question this afternoon will be, why am I an Orthodox believer in God? Why am I a Christian? Why am I Orthodox? And we'll answer these 2 questions throughout the discussion. So, let's delve into the first question. Why am I not an atheist? And this is, as I mentioned to you, the ministry, God's ministry through my weakness, is the ministry of apologetics, defending the Christian faith. Talking to atheists for the past, this is since 2001, 2002, now almost 15, 16 years. Talking to so many atheists and skeptics, agnostics, naturalists. Thank you, my son. And discussing, again, logical reasoning for the existence of God. Now, I would like to ask you some questions. Why am I not an atheist is a question that I think each one of us should intellectually give an answer to. So, I have some questions. Of course, there's I would say, 30 questions or so that we ask atheists that demand an intellect. What would you ask them as far as a question that would demand an answer? Raise your hand and tell me. You're going to have to speak throughout this discussion. This is not just a one-sided conversation.
Can you repeat the question?
What would you ask an atheist, a non-believer, because I'm going to say atheist, agnostic, naturalist, humanist, what would you ask them, a question that you would demand an answer? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
But you're going to...
I have another mic.
Another mic.
Right.
I guess, what is the origin of life?
Perfect. Perfect. What is the origin of life? Good. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I would ask them...
You can just raise your voice so we don't have to...
Yeah, I would ask them the same thing Pilate asked Jesus during his trial. What is truth?
Oh, I love what you're saying. Now we're talking. So my background's in philosophy and psychology, and I love what you just said. What is truth? Perfect. Yes, sir.
It's more of a broad question. What evidence do you have? Because we get asked all the time what evidence we have to prove the existence of God. So I would turn it right back and say, what evidence do you have for the lack of existence?
I love it. Now you're reversing the burden of proof upon the atheist. Give me your evidence for your atheism. Excellent. Excellent. Yes, sir.
Do you believe in good and evil? Define them, and what's the source of them?
Excellent. Wow, you don't need this discussion. You're all good. Define. More importantly, yes, of course, I believe in absolute goodness, absolute badness, or evil. Where's the source? What is the source? Very good. One more. Father?
To whom do you turn in your time of darkest despair?
Oh, I love it. Yes. To whom do you turn in times of despair? Yes. This reminds me of an email I got during Thanksgiving last year from the CEO of our company. She sent this long email saying we have to give thanks, because it's Thanksgiving, November. We have to give thanks, give thanks, give thanks. Now I was so tempted to reply back to her and say, give thanks to whom? But I did not want to risk my job. And I said, I'll just think it, but don't have to, yes, give thanks to whom or turn to whom. Let's go over, there are, like I said, there are 25 or so questions, at least. But we'll go over just some of them, maybe 5 or 6. And then we'll finish with how we can evangelize with these questions the world outside. Oh, I'm going for sure.
Will you be able to share this with everyone?
Of course. Of course. I can share this with you, but this doesn't mean you cannot take notes. I'm always skeptical to say, I'll give you the PowerPoint, because now you're going to sit back and relax. Take notes. They're good for you. Okay. First question. Where did the universe come from? What is the origin of this universe? We can only have 4 possibilities as to the origin of this universe. Only 4 possibilities. It could either have come from nothing, according to Lawrence Krauss. Any of you heard of Lawrence Krauss? The quantum mechanics physicist, you've heard of him, from Arizona State? He came up with this book called Universe from Nothing. Everybody latched on to this book, thinking now they have the answer to the origin of the universe question. Or it was self-made, or it is eternal, or it's created. Only 4 possibilities. Where did this universe come from? What's the origin of this universe? Now, when Richard Dawkins himself was asked these questions, any of you heard of Richard Dawkins? Okay. The God Delusion? Okay. He was asked this question. Mr. Dawkins, where did the universe come from? He paused and said, we don't know yet. Science will find out at one point in time. And then when he was pressed to answer the question, he said, aliens, you can look this up on YouTube, aliens come and created this universe. Now, the questioner should have asked, exactly, where did these aliens come from? But he was kind and asked this question. Did it come from nothing? Of course, the universe did not come from nothing, because nothing comes from nothing, right? Doesn't Julie Andrews say this in The Sound of Music? Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever will. So, nothing comes from nothing. It's the basic law of science. What does nothing mean? No thing. How can a thing come from a no thing? It doesn't make sense. Nothing comes from nothing. Okay, well, this is easy to refute. Is it self-made? And these options, by the way, or these theories, or explanations, are explanations that many atheistic schools of thought that adhere to or claim. The group of atheists that say the universe comes from nothing, according to Lawrence Krauss. There's another group of atheists that say, well, the universe created itself. The majority, however, of atheists say that the universe has always been there. It's eternal, has no beginning. But let's just look at the second option and try to refute this. Could the universe have created itself? Of course not. Because for it to create itself, it must first exist prior to itself, for it to create itself. So it must first be and not be in the same time and the same sense, which is a logical impossibility. All right. Is the universe eternal? Has it always existed?
No.
No? Why not? Maybe? I think be sure you probably have a good answer to this question. But why? Is the universe eternal or not? And if it's not, why not?
I mean, don't they have proof that there was a original point where
A beginning.
Yeah.
A beginning of the universe. Yes. Science, and I'm just using this word loosely here, science had proved conclusively that the universe had a beginning in time. Stephen Hawking said that. Alexander Velikan said that. So many scientists in cosmology had said, or had proved through their scientific research and study, the universe did have a beginning in time. I thought I had some excerpts here. The second law of thermodynamics, the fact that the universe is going into a state of entropy, all of this proves that the universe had a beginning in time, so it is not eternal. So if it did not come from nothing, it is not self-created, it is not eternal, then it must be created. Who created this universe is the question. For the universe to be, or the person, or the entity, or the power that created this universe must be what? Outside of this universe. For it, or him, we don't know it's him now, for it to create this universe? Well, the universe is space and matter. So the entity that created this universe must be beyond space and matter, must be what? Spaceless and immaterial. It also must be very powerful to create this universe. Not only that, it must be a person. Why? Because it must have a will to create. Matter doesn't will to bring anything into existence. Mind does. If I leave this bottle here for 10 years, it will remain here for 10 years, not creating other bottles next to it. Because it has no mind, and because it has no mind, it has no what? Will to create out of nothing. But mind does. Mind implies a person with a will to bring something out of nothing. And that person is immaterial, is timeless, is spaceless, is very powerful, looks pretty darn close to the person Christians believe in as God, Jesus Christ. Okay, very, very quick. I mean, the first question, we can take a whole conference on just the first question. But I just want to give you some questions quickly and get your response and reaction to it. Where did I come from? You asked this question earlier. Where did life come from? So now we know where the universe came from. Where did we come from? The origin of life. What do y'all think? Well, we all know it comes from God. But yes?
From my mom.
From your mom. That's a good answer. I don't know how to respond to this, but where did your mom's life come from? Her mom. Very good. You're going to go back to infinite regression. Where did the first life come from? And that's the question that was actually also asked to Dawkins. Where did the first life come from? Because there's a law called the law of biogenesis. Any of you heard of this law? By Louis Pasteur, the guy that did the pasteurization of milk. Okay? Louis Pasteur said this in this law of biogenesis. Life can only come from life. Until this very day, we could not produce life out of non-life. So life can only come from life. Where did the first life come from? It must have come from not just a living being, but a what?
A willful. A willful.
A willful, very good, a willful being that willed me into existence, but more importantly, life did not come just from life, a living being. Life came from a life-giving being. And that is the difference. So there must have been, or exist, there must exist a life-giving being from whom I have acquired the gift of life. And there's a difference between living and life-giving. If anybody of you have the Bible on your mobile device handy, you can just look up a verse that will delineate this difference to you. If you can go to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 45. And whoever gets it first, please let me know. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 45. By the way, 1 Corinthians 15 is the chapter of the resurrection. We read this chapter in the Pauline epistle in the Feast of the Resurrection during funerals. It's one very classic chapter. Do you have it? Anybody has it? Okay, can you read it first? 15, verse 45.
And so it is written, the first Adam became a living being, the last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
Perfect. Well said. So, yes, first Adam was a living being. The second Adam, the Lord Jesus Christ, is not just a living being, he's a life-giving. So we needed someone who possesses the properties of life in order for him to give this life to someone else. So where did life come from? From someone who has life within himself that did not take it from someone else. Because we would ask the same question, where did someone else get their life from? You see. So where did I come from? We came from a life-giving being. Let's see what atheists say or believe as far as when they are asked this question, where did we come from? Here's what Richard Dawkins says. You and I came from a happy chemical accident. So this is his explanation as to where we came from. We came from a what? Happy chemical accident. Andy Knoll, the Harvard biologist, said, "We don't know how life started on this planet. We don't know exactly when it started. We don't know under what circumstances. Don't ask me. I don't care to know when life began." Stephen Jay Gould said what? "We are here because one odd group of fish had a peculiar fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures." So there's a lot of explanations as to where life came from. Where did we actually come from? But the one, what I would say, logical, coherent explanation as to where we came from is from someone who what? Has the gift of existence or the gift of life within himself, who is a life-giving being. Again, we're pointing to, we haven't proven this is Jesus Christ yet. We're just pointing to someone who has very similar characteristics to the God of the Scriptures. Here's the law of biogenesis. Living things come only from other living things by Louis Pasteur. I don't usually use verses from the Scriptures when I speak, let's say on college campuses in front of atheists or skeptics, because of course you can't use the Bible to prove your point. We're only using logic and reasoning, but just because we are here together in the retreat center, I will share with you some scriptures that point to the fact that the Lord Jesus Christ is the giver of life, and you can see the references right here. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life, and so on. Third question. So first question, where did the universe come from? Must have been created by a spaceless, timeless, powerful, personal person. Okay? Now, second question, where did life come from? It must have come from a life-giving source, because life cannot come from non-life. Third question, do you trust your mind? Do you trust your mind? If your mind, this is Richard Dawkins, this is what he said, and it's not what he said, but he said the second bullet. If your mind developed through the blind and material process of evolution, then why should I trust it at all? Why do you think I should trust you as an atheist telling me this is reality or this is the truth? I had a conversation one time on a college campus with a bunch of atheists that came up to me after a lecture like this, and they said, we don't believe in whatever you're saying. I said, okay, well, let me just ask you a couple of questions. Of course, civilly, kindly, don't engage in debates or anything like that. I said, can you please explain to me what is your mind made up of, or the composition or the ingredients of your mind? By the way, they don't like the word mind at all. They use the word what? Brain, exactly. Because mind is metaphysical. They don't believe in metaphysical things. Brain, it's the organ in their head. What is your brain made up of? They said a lot of things, but in essence it was chemistry, biology, and physics. Ma'abadka. Okay? I said, perfect. Now, according to your belief as an atheist, explain to me what my brain is made up of. They said the exact same thing, chemistry, biology, and physics, over time. I said, great. Why then did I, having the same source as you, come to a different conclusion than you did? I came up with the conclusion that God does exist. You came up with the conclusion that God does not exist. If we have the same source, we should have had the same conclusion. Why not? Explain. Why do we have different conclusions? You cannot tell me this is learned behavior through the years. You can say, yeah, learned behavior will give me differences in preferences. I like vanilla, you like chocolate, that's fine. But we're talking about foundational, fundamental beliefs. God exists, God does not exist. Why should I trust you telling me what you're telling me? Darwin himself he realized this truth. He said, Charles Darwin, he said, with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind? Would you trust in a monkey's mind? Of course not. Why would you trust my mind? C.S. Lewis said it more eloquently. C.S. Lewis said in his book Miracles, if my mental processes are determined entirely by the motion of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true, and hence I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. Do you see? This is called circular what? Reasoning. It's like when you say, Google is the best search engine. Really? How do you know? Google. That's circular reasoning. Okay? Well, my brain is made up of chemistry, biology, and physics. Really? How do you know? My brain. My brain told me that my brain is composed of such and such. That is circular reasoning. It doesn't make sense. Questions so far? I'm going a little quick, just so I can cover as many questions as I can, or questions to atheists, that is. Another question, is there a designer to the design? This is a very simple one. This is the first argument for the existence of God mentioned in the scriptures in Romans chapter, who can tell me? 1. Chapter 1. Okay? His attributes are what? Clearly seen by what has been made. Didn't he say something like that? Verse 21. Is there a designer to the design? Now, Robert Jastrow talked about the anthropic principle, and he said the anthropic principle, and I will explain what that is, or he will explain what that is the most interesting development next to the proof of the creation. And it is even more interesting because it seems to say that science itself has proven as a hard fact that the universe was designed for man to live in. It is a very theistic result. All the parameters in this universe had to be set precisely, perfectly, for the universe to be hospitable to human life. Could time plus matter plus chance result in such an intricate design of our universe? That is, I believe, a greater leap of faith than to believe that some great designer designed this universe for us to live in. I'll tell you another story. With a bunch of atheists. I was also giving a lecture on a college campus, and a bunch of atheists came to me and they said, I was talking about faith and reason. And they said, again, we don't believe in whatever you're saying. There's no such thing as faith. It's all reason, it's all mind. I said, great, let me ask you 3 questions. Always good to ask questions. We were just talking about Tactics, the book Tactics by Gregory Kukul. It encourages us to always ask questions. My questions for them were 3. I said, first question, where did the universe come from? The question we just asked. They said, well, scientists, and again they're quoting Richard Dawkins, their model, their priest of atheism. They said, well, science eventually, at one point in time, will come up with the answer as to where the universe came from. I said, thought twice. Second question, where did life come from? They said, well, the symposium that Richard Dawkins is actually doing now in Oxford, which is true, he's doing a lot of research and movements, basically called the Origin of Life Symposium in Oxford, trying to come up with that answer. Where did life come from? So they said biologists, headed by Richard Dawkins, are eventually going to give us the answer as to where life comes from, or came from. I said, fine, I'll grant you that. Third question, where did your brain that came up with these 2 answers come from? They said, well, psychologists and philosophers will actually tell us at one point where this brain comes from. I looked at them and I said, my dear friends, it seems to me that you live by faith. I also live by faith, but I have answers to the questions that I just asked you. They don't like the word faith at all. To an atheist, the word faith is a taboo word. But indeed, they do live by faith. But the difference here is what? Blind faith versus evidential faith, or reasonable faith. Another question. So let's review real quick. Where did the universe come from? Where did life come from? Do you trust your mind? Is there a designer behind the design? 5th question, do you have total knowledge? Do you have omniscience? Total knowledge, complete knowledge. Ravi Zacharias, one of my mentors, he said, to be logically consistent, atheism has to demonstrate infinite knowledge, which is equivalent to saying, I have infinite knowledge, that there's no being in existence with infinite knowledge. It's as if, imagine I tell you this. I believe, or I should say this, I do not believe that in this entire universe there exists a yellow stone with black dots that's about 1 inch by 2 inches. What am I implying? What am I presupposing? That I have searched the entire universe for that stone and I couldn't find it. مش كده? So when I say, I believe that God does not exist, I'm implying that I have omniscience for what is physical and for what is metaphysical, for that which is material and that which is immaterial. مش كده? I know, I mean, and you can, philosophically, you cannot prove a negative position. Like you cannot say, I believe, or I can prove to you that God does not exist, because that requires omniscience or complete knowledge. Let me share with you a story by J. Edwin Orr. He was from the U.S. Air Force during World War II. He was a Christian, and Mr. Orr asked atheist pilots this question. How much of total knowledge do you actually know? Einstein said that he knew about 2% of all available knowledge. Would it be fair to say that you know about 1% if Einstein knew 2%? They usually agreed. He would then ask, would it be fair to say that God may exist in that other 99% of knowledge that you do not have? He was met by silence. When you say, I don't believe God exists, you're presupposing what? Omniscience. It's just like what Ravi Zacharias said. It is equivalent to saying, I have infinite knowledge that there's no being in existence with infinite knowledge. Now we come to my favorite question. This is when we're going to bring in evangelism. Wrap up and bring in evangelism. What is the meaning? Okay, let me just back up. The first 5 questions were speaking to the mind. مش كده? Were cognitive questions, intellectual, cerebral questions. Where did the universe come from? Where did life come from? The designer, knowledge, and all of these things. Now let's get into not just the mind, but let's speak to the heart. Existentially speaking, existential questions as well. What is the meaning of life? To an atheist, what is the meaning of life? And I'll share with you what some atheists say regarding the meaning of life. What do you think they would say? Raise your hand and tell me. Yes, Mina.
To reproduce.
The meaning of life, not your purpose. Where does the meaning of life come from? To reproduce. I'll grant you that, okay.
Some might say it's meaningless.
Perfect. Actually, most say it's meaningless. Especially if you read Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre and all of them, life is meaningless, and you'll see what they say. Yes. What else? Precisely, this is what most of them said. Let's see what Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous existentialist, see what he said. It is meaningless that we are born. It is meaningless that we die. We are empty bubbles floating on the sea of nothingness, according to Sartre. George Bernard Shaw said, life is a disease. Life is a disease, and the only difference between one man and another is the stage of the disease at which he lives. My dear friends, let me just share with you this truth. We're all diseased. Bertrand Russell, famous philosopher. These are, by the way, these are icons in atheistic worldviews. We must build our lives upon the firm foundation of unyielding despair. That's the meaning of life, according to Lawrence Krauss. Do you remember that name? He's the guy that published this book called The Universe from Nothing, okay? From Arizona State. He said, we are just a bit of pollution. Yani واحد بيقول disease, and he says we're pollution. If you got rid of us, the universe would be largely the same. We're completely irrelevant. What a pleasant, positive, wonderful, hopeful message that is. But again, this is I have to salute all of them because they are being consistent with their worldview. It would be very inconsistent if I were to hear any of these atheists saying, life is meaningful, life is hopeful, life is wonderful, is joyful, because that would be what? Inconsistent with their beliefs. You either have to be consistent and unhappy, or happy and inconsistent with your beliefs. You see, as an atheist, you can't be both. You can't be consistently happy and joyful with your atheism, but they have been consistent with their worldview. This is the byproduct, the natural byproduct of the atheistic worldview. My question to you, yes sir?
Sorry, why?
Very excellent question. Why? Because if I come from time plus matter plus chance, the meaning of life is whatever time plus matter and plus chance will give me. But if I had my origin is a loving God who willed me into existence out of his love, then this is a whole different story as far as the meaning of life. It all hinges upon one question. This is good, a good segue to the next point. Where did I come from? Yes, Edwin.
I say true. Pure atheism presupposes or believes that we have no free will, because we are just the product of physics and chemistry, just like any physics experiment or chemical process which has a predictable outcome. That we have no free will. We're not deciding anything. Everything is determined already just by our physics.
Perfect. And that's an excellent seventh question. Do you have free will? Just like Abuna said, and based on pure atheism, we are determined. Atheism, naturalism I should say, lends itself to determinism, fatalism, precisely as Abuna said. My question to you, where does meaning come from? Where does the meaning, what gives life meaning? Two things. I think you said one of them, Mina. What gives life meaning? Not to produce, reproduce. What gives life meaning? Can you give me two things?
Purpose?
Who said it? Perfect. Purpose. What else? Purpose gives life meaning. A purposeless life is a meaningless life. Just like what Rick Warren said in his book, The Purpose-Driven Life. Okay, what is the second thing that gives life meaning? Anyone knows? Love? Okay, the purpose is to love. Mesh. But what else? It's value. Worth. Value gives life meaning. I ask myself this question, is my life, bless you, worth anything at all? Is it worth anything? Is it better lived than not? What is the value of your life? The second question, what is the purpose of my life? What am I living for? What am I here for? So value and purpose determine meaning. If you have valueless life, you have a meaningless life. If you have a purposeless life, you have a meaningless life. Value and purpose. Now my question to you, where do these come from? Your origin determines your value and your purpose. Where you came from is tied to your value and tied to your purpose. I'll give you an analogy. I'm going to borrow your pen for a second. And forgive me if you heard this analogy before. I shared it with you 2 years ago, but I don't know if any of you were here 2 years ago. Remember this analogy? Good. So, if I were to ask this pen this simple question, when are you most meaningful, fulfilled, and satisfied and meaningful? What do you think it would say if it were to speak? When I'm being used, just used? Used to do what?
Right.
To write with. Mishkada? It was created for that very purpose. To write with. It is meaningful, most meaningful when it's used in writing. If I use this pen to open this door, for example, it will what? Break. Because it's used for a purpose other than what it was created for. Correct? Now, who decided that this pen is created to write with? The Creator, that who made that pen, decided in his mind that I'm going to create an instrument, a device, whatever, to use for writing. So, the purpose of this pen is hidden in the mind of him or her, in this case, him who created it, correct? Our purpose is also hidden in the mind of where we came from. If we came from time plus matter plus chance, if we came from physics and biology and chemistry, then our purpose is time plus matter plus chance. But if we came from a loving God who willed us into existence lovingly, then there's a purpose that is hidden in the mind of him who created us. I am most meaningful when I live according to that purpose. I live a meaningful life when I live according to that purpose. And which leads me to the next question. What is the purpose of my life so that I can have a meaningful life? If any of us, thank you. So let me just get a little bit more, I'm sorry. What we ought to do is to, as this pen, when it becomes more meaningful, when it submits itself to the writer, we also become most meaningful when we submit our lives to the greatest writer so that he can write with each one of us a great story in history, because history is what? His story. And each one of us is a character in that story written by a pen that he created. Another question. What is the purpose of my life? Now this is when we get into evangelism. I was asked this question, this is why I have this picture. I was asked this question in one of the conferences in Egypt. And Wahid came up and said, in Arabic, but he said, what is the purpose of my life? And there, one of the Wudlami was there, and a lot of priests were there. And of course, you're not going to give a lecture for 2 hours, because you can actually talk for 2 hours about the purpose of life. But I just wanted to sum up the answer to this question. What is the purpose of our life? And it's a twofold purpose. My purpose in life is to know God and to make him known. Period. My purpose is to know God and to make him known. Now, the purpose of every Christian is to know God and to make God known. When you know God, when you get to know God, what happens automatically? You will love him. Because when you get to know him, you will love him. When you love him, you'd want to know him more. And when you know him more, you'll love him more. And you will come to a point where when you're so in love with God, inflamed with love towards God, then you begin to what? Share him. That's it. Just like when you get a post on, well, nobody uses Facebook now. Let's say when you get a post on any social media stuff, channels, and then you can like it, but if you like it a lot, you what? You share it. You see? I like God a lot, so I want to share him with others, just like what we do with social media. So when you love him so much, you'll share him with others. And this is the purpose of our life. This is what evangelism is all about. I know God, and I want to make him known to others. That's the purpose of my life. And that's what gives life meaning. Let's talk a little abstract. Any of you heard of the word epistemology? It's the science of knowledge, or knowing what you know. My question is this: how do we know what we know? And I shouldn't have had, this should have been just the first question. But how do we know what we know? We have 3 eyes, not just 2. We have 3 eyes. We know material things by the senses, the eye of the senses. My eyes, my ears, my touch, okay? I know concepts by my second eye, which is my mind. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Can this be seen with my senses? No, but it can be acknowledged and believed by my mind. That's my second eye. I think in our theology we call this the nous. The nous, N-O-O-S, مش كده؟ يعني في التسبيح بنلاقيه يقول جيتين ايه؟ بالنوس. Okay, The third eye is the eye of the heart. And this is used to know people. You know people by heart. That's relational knowledge. So I know material knowledge by my senses. I know conceptual knowledge by my mind. And I know people experientially or relationally by my heart. Are we good now? Meshi? Tayyip. How do I know God? Well, I know God is not seen by my senses, but I know Him by the other two eyes. I know Him conceptually by my mind, and I also know Him relationally by my heart. Hence, the intersection of what? Faith and reason. Reason and faith. Okay? So I know God by concepts, or by arguments, and I know God also by faith, by my heart, by mind and heart. When we evangelize to non-believers, which eye do you think we use? The first, the second, or the third? Only the second. And this is, if you read the book of Acts, chapter 17, St. Paul reasoned for 3 weeks to non-believers regarding, he basically was, you know what he was doing? He was doing apologetics, reasoning. Let's use our mind. Let's give arguments. Let's give evidence for the existence of God using the second eye. Why is that? Because they can't see Him with the first, and they don't know Him with the third. They only have the second eye, which is your mind. However, we must know Him. If we were to evangelize, we must know Him by the third to effectively talk about Him by the second. We must have that relational knowledge of God for us to effectively talk to non-believers using the second eye. Do you see? And this is, of course, what you look at the scriptures. St. Paul and others, we used, not only St. Paul, but all the church fathers, we used apologetics and evangelism, used the second eye, but only after knowing Him by the third eye with their heart. Just like when let's say you're a car salesman. We're all in the sales business, by the way. We're all selling a product. That product, if I may say the analogy, and forgive the analogy, we're selling life, Jesus Christ. We are presenting life. We are presenting Christ to the world. But how did this? Look at the analogy of a car salesman. If I'm selling some type of car, and I know theoretically that this car is this and this and this and that, and I can, my sales pitch will be very well relative to what I know of this car. But what if I own this car and I've driven this car for months and years? I will have a completely different sales pitch, right? I've experienced this car. I've driven this car. Likewise, us as evangelists and apologists, we must have knowledge with the third eye for us to effectively talk to non-believers with the second eye. People must see Christ in your life before they hear about Him from your mouth. They must see Him in your life before they hear about Him from your mouth. And let's skip this. I'll share with you Joe Aldrich's wonderful quote. He said, "Sharing our faith is like music. The words of the gospel are like the lyrics, but your lifestyle is like the melody of the song. The melody enhances the words, just as our lives enhance the message of the gospel." I thought it was very beautiful. Can I repeat it to you one more time? Sharing our faith is like music. The words of the gospel are like the lyrics, but your lifestyle is like the melody of the song. The melody enhances the words, just as our lives enhance the message of the gospel. And I've said that in previous times when I was here, and I said that we have, how many gospels do we have? We don't have 4, we have 5 gospels. We have Mark, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the Christian. And many of those who we will come in contact with will never have a chance to read the first 4. We will be the only gospel that will be presented to the world, and we ought to live our life accordingly. Finally, I wanted to share with you in a few minutes. I want to share with you, but before I share with you the last section, I just want to do a quick recap of what we have discussed. we said that there are questions that atheists do not have a coherent, logical answer for. What are these questions? Can you help me out? What's the origin of the universe? Where did the universe come from?
Where did I come from?
Where did life, come from?
Do you trust your
Do you trust your mind if it's made up of physics, chemistry, and biology? Fourth, is there a design behind this intricately designed universe? Fifth, do you have complete omniscience or knowledge? And we can add what Abuna mentioned, do you have free will? Seventh, what is the meaning of life? And we said that meaning of life comes from two things: your worth, your value, and your purpose. And for us Christians, believers in God, this meaning of life comes from Him who created us. If we came from time plus matter plus chance, then the meaning of our life is basically, as you just read, meaninglessness. But if we came from a loving God who willed us to into existence by His love, then our meaning is to what? What is our purpose in life? Is to do what? To do what? To know Him. To know Him.
To make Him known.
And to make Him known. Okay, if I were to explain Christianity, now remember there are two questions we said we're going to cover in this conference. The first question is, why am I a believer, or why am I not an atheist? The second question is, why am I an Orthodox Christian? But there's a third, or in between, or middle question, well, why am I a Christian? So I'll cover this in the next 2 minutes exactly. This is a way to present Christianity to non-believers in a very simplified way. Very simplified way. I call it Christianity and the Human Condition. There are 4 questions. I call them the 4 questions of the human conditions. These 4 questions, all philosophers and scholars and sociologists and learned people, wise people throughout the years, have struggled with these 4 questions. They want to come up with answers to these 4 questions. Every religion, every philosophy, every worldview must respond or give an answer to these 4 questions. Now here are those questions. What is the problem of humanity? That's called the human condition problem, or the human condition questions. What is the cause of the problem? What caused the problem of humanity? What is the solution? And what is the way to the solution? Let's look at some religions. We're not going to cover all of them because we don't have time to do so. Let's look at some and then finally end with Christianity. And by the way, these questions are also applicable in the medical analysis field. If you're a physician,
It's a research paper.
it's your research paper, exactly. What are the symptoms? What is the diagnosis of the disease? What is the prognosis of cure? And what is the treatment plan? And if you study business and project management, exact same 4 questions. These 4 questions are the 4 questions of basically the human condition questions, or the human problem questions. Okay? Let's look at Plato. The problem, according to Plato, is that we are not good. The problem is vice. Vice. The cause of the problem, according to Plato, is that we're ignorant. Because we're ignorant, we're not good. Now what's the solution? The solution is always the antithesis to the problem, or the opposite of the problem. The solution, if we are viceful, the solution is for us to be virtuous. So virtue is the solution. Well, what is the way to the solution? It's usually the opposite of the cause of the problem. What is the way to the solution? Knowledge. This is Plato in 20 seconds. If you want to study Plato, you just study Plato in 20 seconds. This is it. Okay? Buddhism. What is the problem according to Buddhism? You can read it. Suffering. Pain and suffering is the problem. Buddhism as a worldview, as a philosophy, came as a result of suffering and pain and suffering, dukkha. What is the cause of this problem? Selfish desire. Because you desire to be good, you desire to be this, you desire to want to be painless or pain-free, you are suffering. The solution is what, according to Buddhism? The extinction of self, which is called nirvana. You want to achieve nirvana. How do you achieve nirvana? The way to the solution, the path to the solution is the eightfold noble truth Any of you know the Eightfold Noble Truth of Buddhism? You know, think right thoughts, do right intentions, right deeds, and all of these things. For you to achieve what? Nirvana and extinction of self, which is the extinction of desires. Couple more. Marxism. Karl Marx. He said, the problem with humanity is alienation. The cause of the problem is capitalism. What's the solution, Marx? Classless society. Well, how do we get to that solution? Communism.
Socialism?
Socialism, you can say socialism, communism, they're close enough. Freud has the same issues. Well, let's just forget all of these and let's go to Christianity. We're not going to we can cover all religions. We can actually have a wonderful comparative religions study based on these 4 questions. This would be homework for you all. Look at all the religions in this world. Try to answer these 4 questions. Every worldview must have answers to these 4 questions. The problem, cause of the problem, solution, way to the solution. Christianity. What is the problem? It's not sin. Everyone always says sin is not our problem. Death is the problem. The problem with humanity, my dear friends, is death, not sin. Death. Now, what is the cause of the problem? That is sin, right? Because the wages of sin, death. What is sin? I mean, we can say sin is amartia, missing the mark, and all of that. Great. Sin, in essence, is separation from God. Well, what is God? The source of life. Well, when you separate yourself from life, you die. You see, so the problem is death. The cause of the problem is sin, separation from the giver of life. So what's the solution? What do we all need? Life. We need life. What is the way to the solution? The Lord Jesus Christ. And there you have Christianity in 30 seconds. Very simple, yet most profound. Christ came to give me that which I need most, which is life. He said that in John 10:10. I have come that you may have what? Life, and that you may have it more abundantly. He came to give me that which I need. And I also may say that Christ did not just come to die for us. Christ came to give me life through his resurrection, but he had to die in order to resurrect. He came to give me life with Christ. He came to give me that new life. He didn't just come to, he will go into the next lecture, pay a penalty, and he came to give me life. Life in Christ. Here's a verse that sums it all up. In Romans 5:21, as sin has reigned unto death, as sin has reigned unto death, even so might grace reign through righteousness unto eternal life by Jesus Christ our Lord. And that's the verse that kind of sums up our Christian faith. Christ came to give me. This answers the question that I have in my book, the Timeless Truth book. I have a question here that was asked all the time. Can I go to heaven by living a good moral life? Or, it's in the second section. Will God, it's here somewhere. Chapter 15. Can I live a good moral life without God and still go to heaven? Or can my atheist friend, who's actually very moral, he's such a wonderful person, will he go to heaven or will he go to hell after all? Well, listen, this will answer your question. God did not just come to give us some ethical systems to live by. He came to give me life. Yes, you can live a good moral life, but you'll eventually die and you'll need life. All right, and with that, I just end with this little picture. And glory and honor be to God forever and ever. Amen. Any quick questions you have? Yes. That's why I had to qualify saying quick. Yes, sir. We have 10 minutes? All right.
Okay.
And be concise with your questions so that we can get as many as we can.
So it's actually regarding the very first 2 questions that were asked in regards to the origin of the universe and the origin of life. what's the proof that they're the same origin or same creator? So if we're saying, like, we're proving as Christians, trying to prove as Christians that the origin of the universe is by creator, and then the origin of life is by life giver. So what's our proof that it's the same person or entity?
Right. Well, you can deduce that it's the same person. I'm only proving that it's a person with certain characteristics. It's up to you then to make this leap of faith, saying, well, it's very probability here, that this person with these characteristics and this person or entity in this case with these characteristics point to the God of the Scriptures.
Would this weaken our argument?
Absolutely not, because it's a far greater leap of faith to say that the universe came from nothing, or came from whatever, eternal, or life came from aliens. That is a far greater leap of faith than to say someone who has life within himself, who possesses the life-giving properties, has given life, according again to the law of biogenesis. And as far as the origin of the universe, well, there must be the law of causality. If you all know the law of causality, which says that the effect cannot be greater than its cause. If we have intelligence in the effect, us, then the cause must also have intelligence. If we are free to choose the effect, then the cause must have free will. So because you look at the characteristics of the effect, it will point you to the characteristics of the cause. And with your question is a very wonderful question, and I want to share with you something very, very quickly that will illustrate my point clearly. Never mind. I thought I had it here, but if you just give me one second. Here it is. There you go. The characteristics of the first cause are here you go. So these are the characteristics of the effect. We are the effect. We must have had a cause that caused us into existence, and these are the characteristics. The first cause of space must be infinite. The first cause of time must be eternal. The first cause of energy must be omnipotent. The first cause of complexity, the effect, must be omniscient. The first cause of moral values must be good. The first cause of human integrity must be truthful. The first cause of human love must be loving. The first cause of life must be life-giving. And all of these point to the Lord Jesus Christ. There's the argument. Yes?
So my understanding of your question is, well, why would you believe in a monotheism versus a polytheism, that there could be multiple gods, one creating of this, one creating of this? The first dean of Alexandria, his name was Athenagoras, he lays out a very rational, it's very amazing actually. When I read it was the first time I really felt like this is a very good argument of why polytheism is wrong. And it's too complicated to kind of go into now, but essentially he was saying something like, if you had more than one god, they both have to, both those gods have to kind of exist in a space that is, where gods can thrive. Just like when you have more than one person, we have to live in an atmosphere, we have certain characteristics. And if such a thing existed, there had to be another god that created that space for those gods to exist. So, it goes into much more detail, but it was a very interesting kind of argument.
Interesting, yeah.
Athenagoras.
Yes, sir.
So for many atheists, they truly believe this is a paradigm in which they see their whole entire life. But for many atheists, and I would say the vast majority of atheists that I've encountered, atheism simply means to an end. When you speak specifically to the youth in our church that consider themselves now atheists, or are questioning, does God really exist? When you talk to them, they're not 100% cognizant of it. And you get to the understanding that end to them is freedom, right? If God doesn't exist, there is no sin. I can do whatever I want. And the love of sin, or maybe the shame of sin, keeps them hiding from God the way Adam and Eve did, right? What's interesting or ironic about that is it's a fundamental error in their logic, because sin is prison. It's not freedom. It's the opposite. how do we get them to see that and get them to realize that God does exist, you just don't want him to exist so you can continue doing what you want to do?
Very good. Very well said. Well articulated as well. Yes. I'll just give you a brief answer to your question. But before I give you the answer, I'll tell you that there are three causes. You mentioned the third one. The first cause is intellectual barriers to believe in God, to belief in God, like St. Augustine and the like. Okay? Not a lot of them suffer from that. The other barrier to belief is not intellectual but emotional. I don't like God, I hate God, and he caused disease and usually the problem of pain and suffering. And if you watch the movie God Is Not Dead, the professor in college, he had emotional barriers to belief in God. But the vast majority, as you mentioned, is moral, ethical. I don't believe in God. I don't want to believe in God so that I can do whatever I want to do. I can live my life. I don't have someone to tell me what to do. You can explain to them the true concept of freedom. You think you are being free from God, but true freedom, and you can explain to them true freedom, define it as such. Freedom is not to be free from, it is to be free to. Do you see? There's passive and there is active, if you will, freedom. The Western society that we live in has the first definition of freedom. I want to be free from authority, from parents, from police, from any binding authority over me. So I want to be free from. But you ask yourself this question. Good, you want to be free from all of these people, but what are you free for? It is not, as one of the philosophers said, freedom is not the permission to do what you want, or the license to do what you want. It is the power to do what you ought. And that is true freedom in heaven. Because by that definition, the Western society's definition of freedom, we're not free in heaven. Because we're not going to have any choices to do anything. We're not free. You see? But we are actually truly free in heaven because we are free to do what we ought to do. That's why the verse that says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. What's the relationship between truth and freedom? There's no relationship. Well, there is. Because freedom implies prior knowledge of the truth that you ought to do. This is when you're totally free. You see? So it's a marred definition of freedom. Not only that, but they will come back and realize that they thought they were free, where in fact they were being imprisoned by their passions, and they could just read John Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and Bertrand Russell, Friedrich Nietzsche, all of these philosophers. They realized that they were not indeed free as much as they thought.
Just one more.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to ask if we're evangelizing, what do you think about using the arguments of God from Thomas Aquinas?
Well, he had 20 arguments. Thomas Aquinas had 20 arguments. Which ones are you referring to, or all of them?
No, because from what I'm listening to, you used one argument from motion.
From motion?
Yeah, from contingency on, I presume. The one that is the unmoved mover.
Okay, that was Aristotle's, actually. Yes. I don't see any problem with using these. See, if you're doing evangelism, you can't just have a set of preset 5 or 6 arguments in your back pocket, and then you just say, okay, I'm going to use argument number 2 or number 3. We can't do that, because evangelism implies that you know the person you're talking to, or the group you're talking to. So depending on the person or the group, you use the appropriate argument. You need to know what the barriers to their belief. What's the barrier to belief? Is it a cerebral thing? Is it a problem that I cannot comprehend that God actually does exist, or is it something with the heart? If I am mad at God because He allowed my next door's neighbor's niece die at 2 years old of cancer, I'm so mad at this God, I don't think He exists. He would allow such evil to exist. And I talk to him about the arguments for the existence of God. You're wasting your time and his time. You see? So you need to know what is the barrier. Is it moral? Is it emotional? Or is it intellectual? And then you use the appropriate argument for that. Sometimes when it's emotional, you don't want to say anything at all. You just want to zip it. sit next to this person and offer presents, no arguments. So, back to your question, using the arguments from Thomas Aquinas, I don't think there are any problems with it. Nothing theologically wrong with what he said. A philosopher by Peter Kreeft, I think we were talking about Peter Kreeft earlier, he is actually a big fan of Thomas Aquinas, and he wrote a book to explain the 20 arguments for the existence of God by Thomas Aquinas, by Peter Kreeft. If you want to read them.
We'll save the questions. There's a box here if you guys want to ask more questions, or for the panel discussion tonight, we'll have about an hour to do questions. So I know we have a lot of questions, but just in an effort to keep on schedule.
Good, yeah.
We'll stop it there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.